More drama on YouTube. Then we have YouTube over here going, drama? Me? No, never. And actually this time it kind of isn't their fault. But Totally Not Mark has totally more problems. One of his recent Bleach videos was blocked from YouTube by TV Tokyo. And this is probably the point where you expect me to get all outraged over this, rah, 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 bad company, rah, and so on and so forth. And just as a fun fact, the entire reason why this Dude in a Room channel got kickstarted was because of the Totally Not Mark situation, which occurred roughly about a year ago now. That was when Toei claimed 150 of his videos, Dragon Ball and One Piece related. Now, I'm an agnostic bordering on atheist man, but that put the fear of God into me because my main channel is all about One Piece. So I've made videos on this sort of situation before. However, they were very reactionary and honestly quite biased because I thought my own career was under threat. To be clear, the career of every anime YouTuber is kind of perpetually under threat. In fact, the career of every YouTuber is probably perpetually under threat. But my thoughts on this have changed quite considerably. Whereas last year, I was outraged that a company would do that to someone for simply sharing the love of their product. This year, I'm more like, what are you doing, Mark? Very thankfully, he did get his channel back into action and his business running relatively smoothly, but it was only a matter of time before something like this happened, and it's only a matter of time before it probably happens again. Because the kind of content we're talking about here is on very shaky grounds copyright-wise, and I'm talking about US standards, not Japanese. Now, a lot of you are probably familiar with the term fair use, mostly because every YouTuber, including myself, complains about it at great length and at regular intervals. This is one of those intervals. But what you may or may not know is that there is a broad framework to determine what does and does not fall under fair use. There are 4 pillars, basically 4 big old questions that we need to ask ourselves when classifying something as fair use under US law. So I'm going to go through those 4 questions in relation to Totally Not Mark's content. Because while I do agree that there is a strong case to be made for some of them, there are also some of the pillars where I think that he straddles, if not completely oversteps the boundaries. So let's go through the things it is that I just said. The first question is, what is the purpose of the work? And this is where the word transformative often comes into play. A very basic example is if I were to upload an entire episode of Bleach on my channel, that's clearly not transformative at all. But if I were to make an anime music video using clips from Bleach to an unrelated song, then that is transforming the material. That's a very bad example, by the way. AMVs are not looked upon particularly generously either. But in the case of transformation, I think that Mark is 100% in the clear. The original intention of Bleach, I'm using Bleach as an example because that's the video that got hit, but the original intention of Bleach is to be immersive entertainment. Meanwhile, the intention of Mark's videos are to provide a more meta explanation of how that entertainment is constructed along with his subjective experience of it. So in my mind, there is no question here, because you don't get the same experience watching his videos that you do by watching Bleach, and we'll come back to that in a bit. Firstly though, what also comes under the question of purpose is whether or not the work is commercial. Is it intended to make all of the monies, or is it a not-for-profit like a hobby or an educational video? Mark's videos are clearly for profit, dude has a business to run, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's always going to be a bit of a black mark against fair use, because it does get slightly more grey when you are using copyrighted content to make money. And I say that as someone who was doing exactly that with One Piece clips and screenshots for most of my career. I personally believe it is fair, but I do have quite biased views on that. And I will say that when it comes to Japan's perspective, it doesn't particularly matter if it's commercial or not for profit. There's no real grey area in Japanese copyright law, it's just flat out don't do it or else. But again, we are looking at this through the more favorable lens of the US because YouTube is a US company and arguably more applicable law-wise. But even then, I do think that eyebrows are going to be mildly raised when the question of copyrighted content comes into commercial work. But the next thing we need to ask is, what is the nature of the copyrighted work being used? This is where stuff like public domain comes into play, sometimes with literal plays, like say Shakespeare. You've all heard of Shakespeare. Anyone can commercially produce Shakespeare because he is in the public domain. So this is a question of how available to the public the work being used is. And as an example that would probably fall under the fail criteria, that would be, say, using educational material from some sort of private college course or something along those lines, because that is both owned by someone else and not widely available to the public. And you might think that anime in general comes under the widely available designation. It's entertainment, often on free-to-air TV, at least in Japan. But we are not in Japan, and Bleach specifically is in quite a weird situation when it comes to availability. Back in the good old days, which I think were like a month ago, you used to be able to stream it for free on Crunchyroll, but the licensing rights to Bleach have since been gobbled up. Most Most of you are probably at least tangentially aware that the Thousand Year Blood War anime is currently sitting behind Disney+, but even the original Bleach anime is now behind a paywall, as I believe it is streamable on Hulu or one of the other things. I don't know. I don't care. What I care about is that there is potentially a problem there, because you can't access Bleach for free anymore, at least not legally. And so the nature of the copyrighted work on a scale of public domain to privately owned is beginning to get skewed much more in favor of the latter. And I know I've not used either of those terms properly, it's just to convey the general idea. Basically though, if you want to watch Bleach, you have no choice but to pay for it. And if you want to read Bleach, then you also need to pay for it. And in these videos, an argument could be made that Mark is providing that content in some way for free. And not just for free, but as part of a commercial endeavor to make money. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that I agree with that argument, but that is how companies look at these things. And specifically in the case of Bleach, the nature of using that work now seems a lot more volatile than, say, One Piece, which you can still stream on Crunchyroll for free. So it's much more publicly available, and it's much harder to make the argument that you're disseminating material when it's already widely available for free. Our third factor is probably the biggest red flag though, and that is the amount of work being used. I'm gonna be blunt here. I think that this is where the Totally Not Mark channel would fail if something like this was ever legally tested, which it won't be because YouTubers even of our level don't make anywhere near the kind of money to throw at a copyright battle. But Mark's review videos consist almost entirely of anime clips, screenshots, and the occasional manga page. And also, like the odd meme flashing on screen for a second here and there. But that's bad because it means that purely from an objective standpoint, roughly 50% of the content being used to construct the video is copyright material, stuff that does not belong to Mark. And the key with the amount used factor is that obviously the less you use, the more probably fair it is. So if I cut to a shot of one manga panel during a 10-minute video and it holds the key to explaining my point, then I would argue that that is 100% fair use. But it gets real tricky when 100% of your video's visuals are copyrighted content. At the moment, Mark can claim that 50% of the videos are his because 50% is his audio. He owns that. I mean, except for the odd exception. I did watch a couple of his videos, and in one of them, he played a brief audio music clip from a Bleach opening, and I was just like, mate, for someone who has struggled so much hiking up shit mountain with copyright issues, you like to live dangerously. And to anyone watching, just never ever use copyrighted music. It's not worth it. You are basically begging to have your videos taken down. The weird part is though, using that musical clip actually skews the balance of the video in favor of the copyrighted work. Because now it's more like 50.1% of copyrighted material and only like 49.9% Mark's original work. But the other thing is, in this situation, you do need to think of it from the perspective of a Japanese company. If a video does get manually flagged, then it's probably by an intern who doesn't speak much, if any, English. So all they comprehend of your video is 100% their copyrighted material. And for all they know, your voice is just beat for beat retelling the story. Is it fair? No. Should they be doing better due diligence? Yes. Are they going to? No. So that is the landscape that we need to deal with. And it was actually Mark's situation last year that really kicked me up the ass to do something about future copyright issues. That's why I invested a ton of money into building a library of channel artwork. For One Piece alone, that library has almost 2,000 assets now, and I'm at a point where I don't need to use clips, screenshots, or manga panels. I only use them when I have no other choice to emphasize my point. And I'm not saying that this is the specific path to go down because that would be a lot more difficult to do with the kind of content that Mark makes, but I do think that the Totally Not Mark channel needs to evolve to a place where they eventually own the majority of the content that they use in videos. Which doesn't mean taking anything away from the content. I mean, I imagine that most of his fans watch his videos for the detailed insight and not so much the 480p Bleach clips. But an example of an easy way to generate your own content would be to do more on-camera stuff like what I am doing to you. Let's say maybe 50% of the visuals are on camera, and then all of a sudden you outright own 75% of the material in your video. And that makes a much better case for this pillar of fair use because you're only using 25% of copyrighted content as opposed to potentially over 50%. Now just on this, some of you may remember during the initial Toei debacle that videos that Mark did own 100% of also got hit. I believe there were videos of him drawing Dragon Ball characters, but they were collateral damage. I don't think those videos would have been targeted were it not for the like 140 other videos that were visually pure copyrighted material. Whoever did this just saw the first 100 videos and assumed that the rest were exactly like that. But long story less long, the amount of content used is definitely the pillar that I think Mark's channel would almost certainly fail. And finally, we have the effect on the potential market. Basically, is the content a substitute for the original material? Could people watch this instead of buying the original work. And this is probably the hardest factor to measure, because my belief is that videos like these have a positive overall effect on the market. However, I have no evidence for this other than anecdotes. For example, while I was watching some of Mark's Bleach videos, I did feel like, should I pick up Bleach again and finish it? Because it was a massive part of my childhood. And I will still maintain that up until Soul Society, flawless. I will simp so hard for Soul Society. But I can't help but feel that companies see videos like this with 200,000 views as 200,000 lost sales transactions. Which is ridiculous because you can never guarantee that someone watching the video was going to spend money on your product to begin with. And also they don't replace the original product, which is key. So I was watching Mark's latest video Available, which was on the Arrancar arc, which is in a place further than I ever got with Bleach. And whilst I could sort of keep up, there were a lot of places where I got lost because I hadn't had the experience that he was talking about. Which says to me that I cannot watch these videos as a substitute for watching Bleach. In which case, theoretically, it shouldn't harm the market, but then again, I do feel like companies might disagree there. Which leaves us in a pretty rough spot. Are the videos transformative? Undoubtedly, but roughly 50% of the videos do contain copyrighted material being used to generate profit to an unmeasurable effect on the potential market. Ah, that was a mouthful. So that's just a lot of borderline issues and question marks for me to ever feel personally comfortable making videos like this again. And this might sound harsh, but I really don't think it's a coincidence that Totally Not Mark is the one who is being repeatedly put in these horrible copyright situations. All anime YouTubers have dealt with copyright to some extent. It's just what we do. But no one else is the sheer copyright sponge that Mark is. And I'm honestly a bit baffled that after such a stressful shit fight last year that could have killed his entire career and his entire business, that almost exactly a year later, he is making the exact same style of videos that sparked that situation to begin with. That, to me, is the definition of insanity, doing the same thing and expecting different results. Like, I really cannot emphasize this enough. Mark was very much our canary in the coal mine. He was a big wake-up call for us to get our crap together and evolve, or else risk losing everything. And it's really sad because, no, it's not fair, but we're at a point where the question of fair doesn't even matter anymore. It doesn't matter what's fair, what matters is that it's happening regardless. And every anime video that goes up on the Totally Not Mark channel is a potential bomb that could explode at any minute. Now, I'd also like to say that this video is not intended as advice for Mark, nor is it intended to get his attention in any way. Because a lot of people do say to me, bruh, why don't you just DM this stuff? And that's because it's not for him, it's for you. This channel is all about getting a backstage glimpse into YouTube. And with all of this in mind, if you want to start a YouTube channel, or if you already own one, then just bear in mind everything I've said about how to analyze and judge what fair use actually is.